Okay, members, welcome back to this meeting of special meeting of Angus Council. We will go straight to questions. Cllr Wann.
Thank you, Chair, again, Deputy Provost. Just a couple of quick questions for Councillor Whiteside and Cllr Hands. I'm happy for you, I'm glad that you brought this to our attention in this amendment. I believe it will be an amendment coming through to us for this extremely important element of the Children Learning Committee and Corporate Parenting Board. I was just wondering now, are you aware that just recently in the last 2 weeks, the Angus Council have been provided with an additional 1.63 million for safety mitigation, PPE, cleaning, etc., and 943,000 for staff and family support. Now, I must just clarify this at the moment, that this will not automatically go to the Corporate Parenting Board or maybe even cover all of what you're asking for. But it was just really to see if you were aware of that. And if possible, can I bring Kelly McIntosh in to maybe just make the council slightly more aware of what the money has come in for, and you know, what we may look to propose to do with that in the future, if it's at all possible, and obviously subject to a future council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Wann. Yes, so the 943,000 that's been allocated to Angus Council is to be divided for staff, for support to families, and for further digital devices if required. The biggest proportion going to staff, but a significant proportion being allocated for support to families. The 1.6 million is, as Councillor Wann said, for safety mitigation, so PPE and cleaning, so perhaps not relevant in this conversation. I think what's important to state also is, and it was mentioned earlier today, that the money provided for last year's Holiday Food and Fund programme has been largely unspent. It's £175,000 that's being carried forward. And I think probably the most important thing is just to reiterate the focus that we place on improving outcomes for our looked after children in our Angus education plan, our annual education plan. And perhaps most importantly, the joint working with my colleague Catherine Lindsay. Any funding that we get of the nature that's just been awarded to us by the government, if it does come into the education budget, then I would always liaise with Catherine about how best to spend this. And of course, a focus would be on looked after at home, especially, and other disadvantaged groups of children. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms McIntosh. Councillor Davy, a question?
Yes, it was just a question for Cllr Hands and also officers. I just wondered when this was brought to officer attention, what time frame ahead of the budget, and when Cllr Hands decided to submit the amendment.
Okay, is Mr. Lorimer going to answer this one?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Provost. This particular one, I think we've known about for a couple of weeks or so. In terms of the proposal, it goes through a process of agreement with Cllr. I'm actually struggling to find the specific letter right at this minute within my emails. I have a multitude of funding offers hitting my inbox on a weekly basis associated with COVID, so I'm not finding this one just at the minute. What I would say is the budget proposals and the reports that the council considered earlier today, what we did say was we wanted to come back in terms of all of the various COVID potential spends and funding. So the 21-22 budget that has been agreed earlier has effectively excluded COVID implications at this stage, because we know that we need to come back to those, and there's funding streams coming in all the time that we need to take account of. So it's very hard to keep up, I'm afraid, with the multitude of funding announcements that are being made. As I say, this particular one I think was known about maybe a couple of weeks ago or thereabouts.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lorimer. Councillor Speed, a question?
Yep, thanks, Deputy Provost. Yeah, it's quite alarming at this late hour when this amendment comes in, especially looking through it. And I certainly take my role as a corporate parent very seriously. So when I the whole report is outlining addressing and tackling inequalities and kind of creating greater health and well-being amongst our residents, especially our most vulnerable and young children. So I'm just really wanted to pick up on what Kelly McIntosh had said about the additional government funding that's coming in, as well as the underspent in the holiday fun and kind of food programme that was running pre-COVID, to just really get some reassurances there that she believes that this money will be able to help actually deliver some of the hopes that are within this amendment.
Ms McIntosh, do you want to come back to Councillor Speed?
Yes, certainly. I guess I can just reiterate that our focus is on looking at our most disadvantaged and on closing the poverty-related attainment gap, something that is being written around widely at the moment. A most recent document from the Robertson Trust highlighting that children who are looked after or who are from single-parent families, another group that we need to consider, perhaps need most help as they recover from absence from school. But our looked after children were one of our most disadvantaged groups in terms of achievement in school anyhow, and we're always on our radar. The amount of money that we get from the money that was allocated to Angus Council for support to families will be subject to me presenting a report to committee, and that will be defined on the need. And as we're getting our children back into school, that will be easier for us to assess. The holiday food and fun has always been targeted at specific groups and specific families, specifically those who are entitled to free school meals in the first instance. So there is a lot of crossover there. And I think it's worth mentioning that there are other one-off pots of money that are for the attention of the corporate parent and board, and perhaps Catherine can give more information about those.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms McIntosh. Ms Lindsay, do you wish to comment?
Yes, I'm happy to add to that. So social work have also received a number of small pots of money, small comparatively speaking to the pots that Kelly is talking about, to support the response to COVID. There have also been community plan and partnership monies in relation to children's mental health and well-being. I would say that there's a significant injection of short-term monies that can be used to support the agenda of greater engagement and improved engagement with schools for a range of disadvantaged young people. And I'm confident that that Kelly McIntosh and myself will work together to make sure that money is directed at those who need it most. My preference is always for recurring money, because that's a better way to plan and or procure services for the future. But obviously any short-term additional funding is also welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fairweather, question?
No, it's sorry, Chair. Yes, just a question that regarding what the amendment is saying, any additional monies that are coming forward now, the officers are saying that they can bring a report forward so we can understand how this money can be spent.
Now, Ms McIntosh or Ms Lindsay or Mr Lorimer, who's going to answer this?
Sorry, if I can come in,
Yes,
I'm not sure I understand the question, but it would be my intention, just like I did 3 or 4 times last summer and into the autumn term, to bring a report to committee outlining the education recovery and the cost of it and how that would be funded. And some of that will be asking for money for certain things. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Right. Thank you, Mrs McIntosh.
Thank you, Councillor Fairweather. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Yes, I'm looking at the amendment, and we're concentrating very much on the children, which is laudable, and we should be doing that. But that's not the only money that's being asked for. 1 to 4 is looking at pots of money for communities and for providing equipment for groups to be able to help themselves. Would that be covered by this 2.5 million? that's coming into the council that Councillor Wann's commented on.
Finance question, Mr. Lorimer, maybe?
I think I would refer, thank you, Deputy Provost, to the answer I gave a few moments ago in terms of this budget does not seek to address all of the implications of COVID because those are so uncertain. As I said earlier, there is a multitude of funding pots for various different things coming in, new ones being agreed all the time. So I think the council needs to see what the whole picture is on that, and that's why we've made the recommendation we have in terms of this budget and the treatment of COVID costs and funding within that. There was funding announced, substantial funding announced for general COVID funding just a couple of weeks ago by the Finance Secretary, which we've alluded to in the reports, that the council will need to think about how that is used. So all of these points are things that we need to come back to and look at in the round, I believe, in terms of how best to respond both in the short term and over the medium term to the impacts of the pandemic. I hope that's helpful, Deputy Provost.
Yes, it is, and it's nice to see there's plenty of money coming in for it. I have to say that's good.
Yeah,
Mrs. Buchanan, Albert. Sorry, Councillor Moore.
I'm referring to winter maintenance, not to COVID-19.
2.5 million.
There's Deputy Provost, there's no specific funding for winter maintenance that's been made available in terms of COVID, but of course the COVID funding and any use of that needs to be looked at in the round of the whole of the council's finances and how that all fits together and how that can be used.
Thank you, Mr. Laurel. And as Councillor Sam had said, I think earlier in his seconding the budget, motion was that residents want grip bins, and there is to be a review very shortly of winter maintenance. Thank you. Mrs. Buchanan.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. It's just to really remind members in terms of the 6-month rule, so that if in fact the amendment wasn't supported and it was voted against, then the 6-month rule would apply, unless of course there was a material change in circumstance, and of course that may happen, in which case a further decision on this matter could be taken within that period, subject to the chair or yourself or the provost determining that to be the case, and in terms of either a notice of motion, I think it is, or in terms of a recommendation and an officer report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Yeah, I mean, I was very happy to see this amendment because it fits a lot of things for me around Fairer Scotland duty, addressing inequalities, 20-minute neighbourhoods. And I think what the pandemic has shown to all of us is that so much happens at our doorstep level, and we need to do more and do it more locally for times like these. And while winter planning may be separate from COVID, I think the infrastructure that we had in place when we had the very bad weather actually really demonstrated that community resilience and commitment. And I think the idea of this amendment providing a ring-fenced pot that would allow us to get a quick win on some of the issues, to give back to communities, if you like, who've struggled. We've had groups of four-wheel drive car owners going out and clearing roads and paths. We've had offers, and I have been speaking to farmers about how much more they could do if they had a plough attachment, for example. So that didn't just come out of nowhere, and it would allow some degree of creativity as a stopgap almost as those other pots of money come in. And I'm really pleased to hear that officers seem quite confident that the Scottish Government is feeding a lot of COVID related money in that we can tap into. But I think the idea was around being able to deliver something really quite quickly, based on what we know already. So responding very quickly to those issues around access and supporting people in their communities very much
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bell. Who's going to answer this one? Is this a finance one again?
Happy to come in on that, Deputy Provost. Yeah, it's legitimate for the council to make a decision today in relation to the amendment. There is the proposals are there and clear, and how those would be funded, I think, is also clear. So it's really up to councillors as to whether they wish to use the COVID reserve actually that has been proposed in light of the further information that's been given in terms of additional funding streams that are coming to the council, as Ms McIntosh mentioned.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lorimer. Councillor Salmond.
Yes, I've just been sitting patiently here waiting on the children's item to be discussed in a little bit more detail. So obviously I'm going to focus on the first request. And obviously I'm hitting this cold because it's the first I've seen it. So I'm going to have to rely on, I think, Mr. Cochrane and Mr. Scott to come in here. But for me, there's quite a lot of anomalies here and questions to be answered. And I, as much as I have sympathy for this, would be probably unable to support the request at the moment. I know for a fact one of the reasons we're having the winter maintenance review is we have a policy on grit bin locations, and that would be why some colleagues were told when they asked for constituents to have grit bins, they were told that they couldn't be located in the areas that they were looking for. So that's one of the reasons that we're having the winter maintenance review. I think also for me, we'd have to determine how we're going to prioritise the requests and how they're going to be ranked. It doesn't tell us that here. And also for me, we'd have to decide how we're going to share this fund fairly over Angus. So that there's just too much variables and unknowns for me to personally agree that we're going to ring fence 200,000. But I would welcome some feedback, possibly if Mr. Cochrane or Mr. Scott would like to come in. Obviously, we're speaking about here flooding, winter maintenance, local accessibility, health and well-being. I appreciate some of these topics are not all for these officers I've identified, but maybe if one of my officers can just give us a bit of feedback on the current policy, which might limit the requests from our communities to have grit bins currently.
Thank you, Councillor Salmond. Mr. Cochrane.
Thank you, Deputy Provost, and thank you, Councillor Salmond. I think, from my perspective, the text of item 3 there suggests that this is wider than just winter maintenance, including things like flooding, etc. We do have a number of self-help community groups, such as the flood group in Edzell. The individual doing the work in Freakham has been mentioned, and through the PB process last year, there was a group set up in Glamis that are doing self-help with gritting, which is perhaps beyond what the council would normally do. I do think the winter maintenance review will touch on winter services and the provision of grit bins and indeed self-help. I suppose what I think the motion here, or the amendment, sorry, here, is obviously to widen that into some of the community benefits that have been ongoing at the moment, and it may therefore take a different tack than just winter maintenance.
Can I just come back, Deputy Provost?
Yes, of course.
Obviously, in my speech and in the finance convener's speech, we gave a commitment to review funding of winter maintenance once the review has been completed. So that would be for me the opportunity to look at especially the grit bins for our communities, and then we would have an agreed policy so everybody would clearly understand how we're going to allocate requests for grit bins. So I appreciate what Mr. Cochrane's saying, but I'm still not comfortable with agreeing to 200,000 when I don't really know what I'm agreeing to. And then we'll need to look at the governance behind this as well. There's not a lot of information in this amendment that I feel that I could make a decision today on, which is disappointing.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. Councillor Davy?
Yeah, it was another point of clarification, I suppose. I noticed a lot of the things which are included in this amendment were included in the administration budget, including 75,000 for maintenance, 100,000 for gully cleaning and things. And I'm also sympathetic with the need for greater winter maintenance, and it's why I contacted the Scottish Government for additional funding, and they said no. But I suppose the question I have and the concern is, obviously this is the first we've seen this, and would accepting this, or would the fact that we're discussing this, would this potentially impact our ability to have a different policy should we have went through the process? Would accepting this amendment impact our winter maintenance review, for example? So we end up making a decision which is off the cuff, essentially, rather than a well thought out, fair decision for the whole of Angus.
Thank you, Councillor Davy. Mr. Cochrane, just because it was touched on winter maintenance policy, can you answer that question?
Again, probably my previous answer is the same, that this is winter maintenance, and I would agree that the winter maintenance review would cover perhaps the winter maintenance element, but the proposal, and perhaps Councillor Hands should speak to that, seems to be wider than just winter.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Devine.
Yes, thanks, Deputy Provost. I know that I mean, what Councillor Salmon is saying is that there's not a lot of detail, but that would be very operational. And honestly, we don't do that in amendments, do we, or motions? When he talks about the winter maintenance and the MOG and all of that, this would give some extra money for that kind of thing. But I do take Mr. Cochrane's point. I think that what we're wanting here is a much wider resilience in communities, not just winter maintenance. And I think it would actually help new groups to start up. We definitely need more. We know there are some excellent ones, but they tend to be a bit rural. And I think that we want to see others starting up. And the fact that there's finance there for equipment, I think would be very, very beneficial and probably help them to make up their minds to do this. Now, we've been talking about resilience groups for a very long time, 3-4 years, and we really haven't made a great deal of progress. I think that this is a potential to change that around a bit.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Councillor McMillan Douglas.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I think we've got two different things here. We've got money which apparently is coming into us, and not all of us knew all the detail of that, probably quite correctly. And then we've got an amendment which is suggesting various ways of spending money. They're not the same thing. Personally, I would rather have a decent, what I would call proper governance, so that an officer wrote up what the money that we were getting coming in was, and then either that officer or another officer wrote up suggested ways of, and then in either in full council or one of the council's committees, we could discuss that. Am I asking a question here, Deputy Provost, or am I making a comment?
It is a question you've asked.
Okay, I will make a question. I would like to ask one of the officers, and I think it's probably Mr. Lorimer, whether what the normal way of dealing with these things is. and I would have thought, if it's new money coming in, that a paper was written on that, letting us know what it was for, and then we could come to a view on how we might implement it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McDonald. I think, and Ms McIntosh will correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think Ms McIntosh and Ms Lindsay have given us assurances that because there's this extra funding coming in, and correct me if I'm wrong, that reports will be coming to committee for approval of spends of that money. Is that correct?
Yeah, if I can just come in there, yeah, just like we did last summer and throughout, we brought our education recovery paper asking, so like when we asked for additional staffing and committee granted that, and we asked for money at that time to pay for PPE and transport and other things because we were unaware of funding from the government at that time. This time, we've been made aware of funding from the government, some of it just within the last week. So again, I will bring a further updated educational recovery paper based on what I perceive the need to be moving into the next school year.
That's very helpful.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hands, I see your hand's up, but it's maybe a previous one, is it?
No, I was just aware a lot of people were asking me questions, but I haven't been given the opportunity to respond to some of them. And it was at the beginning of the debate, and I have to say I've now forgotten probably most of the questions. But it is just to say that, you know, it's not money, COVID money coming in. There's COVID money here and now. We have the opportunity today to actually commit this money to these projects. And in terms of, can I just clarify about the community resilience? Keep in mind that it would be communities looking at community resilience plans first. So it's not just, you know, I'm going to apply to get this. Actually, we need to have a systematic look at what local areas are actually needing. And although it's in 4 broad headings, I'm not trying to usurp the winter maintenance review at all. I also suspect, again, that review is a more strategic one. What I am envisaging there in terms of winter maintenance, and maybe it's the wrong terminology, but it was the only terminology that I could think of. But you know, generally with winter maintenance, it tends to be the main roads. But we've got people living in housing estates or clusters of housing, etc., that can't get out their house, or they can't get along the street. If local people had the ability to come together and help out one another to do that sort of thing, your winter maintenance review is never going to go down to that micro level. But the resilience plans for localities will have that opportunity, as they will for any flooding. You know, in Strathmartin, as you know, Deputy Provost, we have a few houses that are vulnerable to the Dichty burn. It's not the whole of Strathmartin, but you know what? There's maybe some times that the householders in Strathmartin could really do with a hand from their neighbours. That's what this resilience plan's about, bringing it down to the local level. There's people that can't get out and are needing help to get out, but you know what? They're too frightened to ask for that help. If somebody compiling a community plan went around the doors and said, you know what, we're doing this, we're doing it for everybody, is there anything you need help with? If you actually ask people, they're more likely to come forward with that need. Similarly, if we have cohesive plans together and we know what needs done and we know where the volunteers are needed, if we get people coming forward and saying, oh, I'd like to help, sometimes names just go on a list and that offer of help isn't taken forward. Whereas if we have the resilience plan set up and resourced, we can immediately make use of that person more likely than not. So please don't think about this suggestion is reviews of what's currently done. It's not meant to be attacking anybody about, you know, we're doing this work, so, you know, this amendment isn't necessary. I see it as being complementary to what's already being done. And as I've said in my speech at the beginning, we've got a huge resource out there in our local areas. People are wanting to help one another why not act? Why not act now to give that confidence in them and give them the resources? Similarly with the looked after children element, it doesn't really matter about what budget, whether it's dribs and drabs for this budget or that budget. The key thing here is we're needing to make that commitment to these young people. Is it not better we actually make that commitment today rather than waiting for a future report? We know the need's there. And if there's more funding coming, believe you me, I'm sure officers won't find it too difficult to look at alternative needs as well. And if there's any surplus left from the requests for funding, they can be reallocated back to budgets. I don't see what the issue is personally. I think these are things we need to address. We need to do them now. The need is here now, and I would still support the amendment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fairweather, is yours a point of clarification?
No, mine is actually going to be how we deal with this, and I've got comments as well.
Okay, well, yeah. I think Councillor Braze has got a question, so we'll bring in Councillor Braze first because his hand's up, and then we'll come to comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Mine is maybe a question and maybe a comment, but thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I would just like to firstly point out that there wasn't a participatory budget programme this year. And this amendment would perhaps go some way to filling that gap. This amendment is going to give encouragement to community groups to come together, as Cllr Hands has said, and get things done now while we're still in the middle of a global pandemic. This is money now and action now. Very important, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Braze. Councillor Fairweather?
Yes, it is a comment, quite a long one actually. I'm listening to this word here, now, right? Well, if it's now, why wasn't it in your budget? Why wasn't it in your balanced budget? This totally surprises me. We were accused of being a sleight of hand. Well, I certainly think this is right. This is particularly naughty. There is money there, and there's new money there. We've only found out about that actually in the last 15-20 minutes. Cllr Hands has just said systematic look for what we need. Well, what we need is information on how that would actually look. There is not a lot of information in the amendment, and it's a decision. It's certainly I'm not prepared to take without further information, and I'm sure my colleagues will agree with that. So I can't agree with the amendment. I'm not against the amendment. I do believe that if there is new money, and from listening to the officers, where it could be targeted to, and as suggested in the amendment. So if the SNP were quite happy to drop their amendment and say they would wait for further reports, so we do have all the information to hand and we do get it right, then I would be happy, and I would be suggesting then that an amendment would be for the officers to bring reports on how to spend any new monies, any carry forward monies, how that is prioritised and how that is allocated, and that is the right way to do it. This cack-handed just come in and throw in an extra hundreds of thousands of money and expecting us to accept that at a budget meeting that we've basically just agreed is not acceptable. So would the SNP drop this this amendment and go with it and agree to wait for further reports, and we could ask the officers to bring them as the money comes in, and the money already, some of that money already is in, we can get that done fairly quickly.
Thank you, Councillor Fairweather. I'll come, Councillor Hands is up, but Councillor Moore first. Comment?
Yes, it's a comment, Deputy Provost. Yeah, I'm listening to this, and in my previous life, I chaired a parish council, and that parish council was the first one in England that developed a community emergency plan, which looked at its area and it said, these are the main risks. This is how we deal with it. It linked with City of York Council, so if it was a major emergency, information was fed down, it was spread out. But in order to get this plan together, it took money. And if this money from this amendment can create community emergency plans up here, then it's going to benefit all the residents. And I've just been checking through and I have found my original community emergency plan. I will quite happily send it to any member who wants to see it and see what I'm talking about. But I think that this, let's put that money there so that the communities can have the funding to make themselves self-sufficient.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Myles?
Yes, Deputy Provost. First of all, would be interested if Cllr Hands was accepting Councillor Fairweather's suggestion, in which case my comments might be superfluous. Could you get an answer to that first, and then I'll comment?
Yeah, of course. Councillor Hands?
Thank you. I don't understand why there's such a problem about agreeing the amendment today and committing the money. In terms of the plan about how it would run, I think I've said something in the amendment, and sorry, I don't have a copy of it in front of me word by word, so I have to do it from memory. But there should be something in the amendment that states a further report is going to come to Policy and Resources. But what I envisage with this is we've got a form that we get the local community groups to complete. We also use local community constituted groups, probably community councils or other means if there's other appropriate bigger groups to be the sort of vehicle that we can collate the plans through. And I think once we've got that together, I've given you the 4 broad themes about what it would be. There was obviously, we'd have to agree in the report that would come to Policy and Resources about what would be in the plans and then what would also be in the funding process. And for me, it would be looking at what's the community benefit, who in the community is going to benefit, does the community groups have access to other funds, etc. And that would be scored. It would be running on something similar to common good that comes to Policy and Resources all of the time. I just do not understand the delay in not acting on this today. This is going to take time to speak to community groups, to do the engagement. And if we don't fund it today and agree it today, when will it get funded? Or is this a mechanism from the administration to really put it in the long grass? And can I just answer one little comment as well? Well, it's been a repeated comment actually about the fact that this amendment's been brought today. It's perfectly reasonable for amendments to come to budget. In fact, our standing orders allow for up to 3 amendments. So why am I being criticised for bringing this amendment today? I would have thought it's quite a constructive amendment. I don't think it's controversial. I'll repeat, the need is there. The need is for us to commit. The need is for us to act now. Or are you telling me in a roundabout way that you're not going to commit to this, but it's a real bother and you want it just to be dropped?
Councillor Hands, I don't think that's what the members are some of them shown concern are meaning at all, and nobody said they're against your amendment. But I think what they're looking for is they've heard from Mr. Lorimer that different pots of money is coming in all the time. We've got assurances from both Ms. McIntosh and Ms. Lindsay that reports will be brought to committee. They're about to do a review on winter maintenance. The extra grit bins, I think, will be one of them that will come up. I don't think personally there's any reason why we can't go to the communities now, get the reviews, so that when these reports come in, we're ready for it, and then let's go get on with it. That's only my view. There's somebody else now, Cllr Myles, comment.
Yes, I expected a yes or no answer there, and disappointed it didn't come. Anyway, my comment is to repeat something that actually Councillor Duff said earlier on today. What we have to deal with the budget are needs rather than wants. Now, to my mind, this comes on the wants category. We all recognise they're all laudable proposals put forward by Cllr Hands, but what we have to do is make sure they're all well thought out and developed forward and come forward in a proper way and shape and form. Now, we've heard from the officers today that will be done, and if an extra money is coming today, that could be done quite soon. So I think we need a thoroughly thought out proposal to get the money spent where it is needed, and not just on a whim of what people think they may want. I mean, there already got comments from Councillor Bell that farmers would like snowplows. Okay, farmers would like a snowplow, but they're not necessarily needing it. So we need to make sure that the money is well spent and spent in the areas of need. So I feel that these will come in due course and due time when the officers have time to draw up well thought out proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Myles. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Provost. I wasn't going to say anything because it's late and I'm really wanting my tea. I must admit, I could not let Councillor Fairweather's comments go unresponded to. I mean, I think Cllr Hands has said she has brought forward an amendment which is properly correct and allowed by the standing orders. I would have to say I am unhappy about, we spent a lot of time, was it only last year, thrashing out a new procedure for budgets. And we've seen for the second year running the administration pull a stunt, pull a rabbit out of the hat on the budget day. Clearly had seen the SNP budget, seen our commitments to roads and felt they had to match it. And for Councillor Fairweather to criticise Cllr Hands is staggering hypocrisy.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Durno, a comment?
I'll be quick. I'll just say maybe the amendment for Cllr Hands would go through quicker if she asked for a crazy golf, because crazy golf can go through and it's £200,000. But that's not a need, is it?
That's out of order, Chair.
Councillor Durno. Councillor Bell.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on the point that Councillor Myles made. The farmers I've spoken to don't want a snowplow attachment for their tractors just for fun. They really want to do more to help their communities, and they're fully aware that the people who live and work in their communities are frontline workers, they're nurses, they're social care officers, they're trying to improve access for vulnerable people so that they can get their care package delivered every day, and they can get food deliveries. Genuinely, it's a community effort that they want to be part of. It's not for their own ends.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor McMillan-Douglas, a comment? Councillor McMillan-Douglas, comment? Okay, we'll come back. Councillor Boyd, a comment?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Fotheringham. I just can't believe we're still discussing this. I'll put it in layman's terms. Come on, give Cllr Hands a break here. There's nothing wrong with this. Give the vulnerable people a chance here. Give the people that are getting flooded a chance here. I have been out quite often along at West Haven where it can be sorted out quickly. And officers have all been doing their utmost best, but we need to get things there. So the cycle path along at Carnoustie is flooded. People, there are so many things going on. just give her a break and give the people, the good people of Angus, a break and vote this through so we can get on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. Yeah, I just wanted to point out, I mean, like all amendments, this had to go in several days in advance. Officers were consulted beforehand and during the construction of this amendment. That was all above board and it was done properly. We've heard about a winter maintenance review. That's going to take time and that's not going to come into effect until after the next budget. This is a pot of money that's ring-fenced that can be used immediately. We've got communities who don't have enough grip bins. We've got communities who've got resilience plans in place with no funding and no equipment. It's a quick win. And anybody who votes against it will have to be happy going to their community councils and their communities and saying, actually, I didn't approve of this fabulous idea. And that's just a thought for you all. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor McDonald.
I think Councillor Whiteside really just covered what I was going to say. I think the only reason that people would choose not to support this amendment is maybe because we've not understood it. I think there's been a lot of sort of dancing around it in other pots elsewhere, but Councillor Whiteside's just absolutely raised this, you know, what this is all about. And it's not political. This is a win for every single member on the council today. It's Cllr Hands' amendment, but it's going on to this budget. It's a win for everybody. So I can't understand why we wouldn't support this.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Councillor Wann, a comment?
Yeah, a very quick one. I can see folks start to flag now, but I don't think any of us in the administration are against the actual amendment. It's just the fact that, yeah, these things get sprung upon you. That's just the way of the budgets. That's how it happens. That's politics, I suppose. It would have been good maybe to have raised this direct with Children and Learning convener at one time on one part of it, and we could have discussed this as an ask maybe within the budget together rather than just springing it on us, because you're right, there hasn't been a lot of time to look into it. There hasn't been a lot of time to discuss with our officers. I think what Councillor Fairweather has proposed isn't a bad idea. It's certainly a kind of in the middle, let's get our heads together, let's think about this, because yeah, it's something that we do need to do. So I would suggest that I certainly will be going along with the original budget, and you know, we'll look seriously into this tomorrow, starting tomorrow, and see what we can do as an administration and opposition together.
Are you going to arrange that, Councillor Wann?
I can certainly arrange that with Catherine Lindsay, Kelly McIntosh and Cllr Hands and Whiteside.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. Councillor Salmond?
Yes, can I make the same offer that Cllr Wann's just made? I'm happy to sit down with myself and Cllr Stewart with Cllr Hands and whichever other colleagues she'd like to bring with her with officers, and we can discuss in more detail the first item on it, which probably comes under communities.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Salmond. Now, there's no other comments. Councillor Fairweather, do you have a comment, or have you had a comment?
Well, it's not a comment. It's how I'll take this forward, Chair. I just want to reiterate to Cllr Hands, I can assure you we are not going to kick this into the long grass. And what Councillor McDonald said, it will be a win. Yes, it will be a win, but we want to get it right. Councillor Boyd said, give Cllr Hands a break. It's not about giving Cllr Hands a break. This is about giving everyone a chance here. So if my last suggestion is not acceptable, I will come in with an alternative amendment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McMillan Douglas.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Yes, I don't think, one of the councillors and my colleagues said that this is not political. I agree, I don't think it is political. It's very boring, but you've got to get the process right. We're actually talking about quite a lot of money here. And if this is going to be allocated in a way which actually suits the communities, it's got to go through some sort of group which represents the communities. And that isn't true. We've got that in every part of Angus. So I think it just needs a little bit of thought, and that's where Councillor Fairweather, Cllr Wann just now, and Councillor Salmond have come up with a way forward, and I would certainly very strongly support that.
And would you be willing to be part of a group along with Councillor Salmond and Cllr Wann that meets with Councillors Hands and Whiteside and any other members that wish to go along as well?
I would be prepared to meet with any councillor, and of course I would. Yes, Deputy Provost, of course I would.
Yes. Okay. Okay. On that basis, Councillor Hands, is your amendment standing, or from what you've heard, does it assure you that means they're saying they'll start discussing with you tomorrow?
I think given the amount of conversations we've had this evening, no, I would want my amendment to stand, and if it's not successful, I would also want to use Standing Order 1711 and get the amendment put into the minutes of this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Whiteside, final comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say the same. It's a proper amendment. It's been properly put together and put to council, and we should take a vote on it.
Okay, final comment, Councillor Speed?
No, sorry.
No. Okay.
Chair,
Actually, yes.
Chair, my amendment. I wish to give notice of what my full amendment would be.
Sorry, that's fine.
Okay, Councillor Fairweather.
The amendment would be for officers to bring reports on how to spend any new money and carry forward money, and how it is prioritised and allocated and brought to the relevant committee, and further form a group MOG to agree how to work with communities.
Do you have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second it. Yeah.
Convener.
Happy to second it.
Mr. McCaskill?
It's normal practice to take a vote on the first amendment before we go into the terms and the competency of any further amendments. I would also ask Councillor Fairweather, in accordance with standing orders, that he's required to put that amendment in writing. So it would be much appreciated if what you have could be circulated, either sent to myself or Sarah Forsyth, so we can then email it round to all other members of the council.
Councillor Fairweather?
Yes, I'll see if I can. I'm not very good at write on this machine, but I will try and get an email to Mr. McCaskill now.
Much appreciated, Deputy Provost.
Councillor McMillan Douglas, then, before we go to the vote, are you still moving the original motion?
I'm sorry, Deputy Provost, I didn't hear you. You got cut out.
You, as the mover of the motion, are you still moving the motion as is?
It is not. You mean the budget?
Yes, because we go. That's
sorry. Which motion? Isn't Councillor Fairweather that?
No. He's an amendment, so we have to vote motion or amendment. You have the motion. You still hold the motion.
Oh, I see.
Councillor Hands has the amendment.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yes.
So you're still moving the motion, the original motion, Councillor McMillan Douglas.
Yes, and the original motion is the budget.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Yes. Mr. McCaskill, please.
Yes, Deputy Provost, we'll go to the vote then. The motion by Councillor McMillan Douglas, seconded by Councillor Salmond, is in terms of the first set of papers circulated. The amendment by Councillor Hands, seconded by Councillor Whiteside, is in terms of the paper just circulated. And members should note that the terms of the amendment are available online. Forsyth will now do the roll call vote. Deputy Provost.
Thank
you. Deputy Provost.
Motion.
Councillor Bell.
Amendment.
Councillor Boyd.
Amendment.
Councillor Braze.
Amendment.
Councillor Brown.
Motion.
Councillor Cheap.
Amendment.
Councillor Davy.
Motion.
Councillor Devine.
Amendment.
Councillor Duff.
Amendment.
Councillor Durno.
Amendment.
Councillor Fairweather.
Motion.
Councillor Hands.
Amendment.
Councillor King.
Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Laurie,
Motion.
Cllr Lumgair,
Motion.
Councillor McMillan Douglas,
Motion.
Councillor McDonald,
Amendment.
Councillor McLaren,
Motion.
Councillor Moore,
Amendment.
Councillor Miles,
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl,
Motion.
Councillor Salmond,
Motion.
Councillor Speed,
Amendment.
Councillor Stewart,
Motion.
Stewart,
Motion.
Cllr Wann,
Motion.
Whiteside.
Amendment.
The motion is carried by 14 votes to 13.
Thank you, Mrs. Forsyth. Okay, we'll just wait on Councillor Fairweather's amendment now.
Doing it now.
Deputy Provost.
Yes, Councillor Moore.
Understanding Order 1611, I would like my dissent recorded, please.
Yep, Senior Deputy Provost, under Standing Order 17.1, I would like the content of my amendment put into the minute.
Okay, thank you. That I'm sure will be noted by the clerk. Councillor Devine.
I'm a little confused here now. We're going to get another amendment, and is that amendment going to be taken against the budget?
No.
As ours has just been.
No, it will be added to the budget.
I think this is an amendment to get an assurance, give you an assurance that they'll meet with you before officers bring reports to committee. I think that's what this is. That's the feeling I got from listening to Councillor Fairweather anyway.
Yes, that's the feeling I got as well, but our amendment has just been taken against the budget. His amendment is standing alone
point.
like a motion.
Good point. Mr. Macaskill, can you advise here?
Well, any amendment needs to be taken against the substantive motion. So in effect, what you'd be saying is that if the amendment is relevant and relative to the motion, then Councillors Fairweather would be moving an amendment which would need to be voted against the substantive motion, which is the administration's budget.
Councillor Miles?
Yes, but if Councillor Fairweather's amendment is accepted by the mover of the substantial motion, then there doesn't need to be a vote. So we need to wait and see. I haven't seen it yet, but if it's accepted by the mover of the original motion, it can be then incorporated into the original motion.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Miles.
That's it sent to Mr. Macaskill. Hopefully it makes sense.
Mrs. Buchanan, sorry, my apologies.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I was just wondering if, in order to get this put together, and I'll defer to Mr. Macaskill because he's got the details coming through to him, if it would be appropriate to have a 10-minute recess. Now, I know members won't be minded to do that, and I can see Councillor Devine's not in favour of that. But can I just defer to Mr. Macaskill in terms of that, please, if you don't mind? Thank you.
Of course, Mr. Macaskill.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. Just trying to get the details of Councillor Fairweather's. I mean, it has been badged as an amendment, but I think my view would be that this potentially could be an addition or an addendum to the motion, the terms of which is for officers to bring reports on how to spend any new money and carry forward money, on how it is prioritised and allocated and brought to the relevant committee, and further form a group, member officer group, to agree how to work with communities. So my initial advice, Deputy Provost, is if this was taken with the consent of the mover of the substantive motion, Councillors Macmillan Douglas, and the seconder, Councillor Salmond, then there wouldn't be an amendment and there would be no vote.
Okay. Councillor Macmillan Douglas, acceptable?
Yes, what I heard of it, would it be possible just to read it again?
Okay, Mr. Macaskill, please.
Absolutely, Deputy Provost. Just
sorry, Mr. Macaskill. It's just you disappeared halfway through it on my.
I hope it's coming through clearly, Councillor Macmillan Douglas. It's for officers to bring reports on how to spend any new money and carry forward money, on how it is prioritised and allocated and brought to the relevant committee, and further form a member officer group to agree how to work with communities.
Yeah. I'm very happy to accept that as part of my motion.
Let's go.
Deputy Provost, sorry, if I may come in, if that's all right.
Yes, of course it is.
Thank you. I think we need to be really clear on the wording. If this is a standalone addendum to the original budget, and I'm not 100% convinced that it is. It's very difficult, as you'll appreciate, when we're all remote, in order for us to discuss matters as officers between ourselves, and often we get the opportunity to do that when we're sitting beside each other. So I do appreciate members won't be keen on this, but can I please ask for a 10-minute adjournment so that I can discuss the detail with Mr. Macaskill, because I haven't seen it either, and we'll just need to make sure it's competent in terms of what's been moved.
Can we all enter breakout rooms?
I don't think we need to do that. There's no breakout rooms this time. No, I don't think so. Mrs. Buchanan will just come back and report to us verbally. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be my intention if members are minded to agree to that. Thank you.
A 10-minute recess and then we'll be quick after it.
Deputy Provost, could I ask a question first?
Yes, of course you can. Of course you can.
That'd be good. Would this be a separate process to the PB engagement that we've had, or would it be incorporated into an existing process? And I appreciate that that might be in a state of flux.
Yeah.
I did it.
Okay, who would answer that one?
Through yourself, Deputy Provost, it would depend on the words of the actual addendum to the motion that's been put forward, if that was what the intention was.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Buchanan. Right.
Deputy Provost.
Yes, Councillor Moore.
Sorry to interrupt, but from what I was hearing, I don't know where this money is coming from. So can we have that clarified, please?
Well, I think that's what there's, as Mr. Firstly, we'll go back to what Mr. Lorimer said. There's pots of money coming in, all regularly. We've got an assurance from Miss Lindsay and Miss McIntosh that reports will be brought to the relevant committees. Hence the offer of Councillors Wann and Salmond to meet with Councillor Whiteside and Hands and any other to discuss.
Yes, but this month it says the money, I believe.
And
very vague about which money it is. So I'd like that tied down in any amendment.
Okay, well, we'll wait and see what Mrs. Buchanan comes back with. Mr. Macaskill's emailing her now with the Councillor Fairweather's. Yes, Councillor Braze.
Yes, just for clarity, it looks to me very much like a motion, the budget, which has already been voted on twice, is now just going to have another bit stuck in the end of it without any vote taking place? That just seems completely bizarre to me.
I think Mr. McCaskill clarified that, but I'll ask him again, Councillor Brace. Mr. McCaskill?
Deputy Provost, sorry, I'm not sure if Mr. McCaskill's still here just now because we thought we were going into a recess. Sorry, I see that he is here. Can I suggest, again, Donald could come in or Mr. McCaskill could come in, but I think I'd prefer to have the recess first and then we could come back with a proposal and we can answer any questions in terms of members' queries, which I totally understand.
Okay, we'll have a 10-minute recess now and we'll have further discussion then. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.